5 minutes past 5 on Drive, the World Health Organization has formally recognized addiction to gaming as a medical disorder. It means people who can't stop themselves from excessively playing electronic games will be eligible for treatment on the NHS. Kendall Palmer believes that her 15-year-old son is addicted to gaming, and she thinks the change in classification is a good start at addressing the problem.
For me, this is the beginning of the beginning. Just naming it will help enormously to validate for him, and he's started naming it, but there isn't treatment out there, and he's talking about being an addict, and that's helping him. And there's a long way to go, whether it's when things get problematic. I'd love that out of his experience that other children could get help so it doesn't get as bad as this.
Andy Robertson is a gaming expert and is currently writing a book on the subject. So Andy, what do you think of today's news of the classification?
Well, the classification is one step towards the NHS adopting it. I think some headlines have said this is the moment that GPs can actually diagnose gaming disorder. We're quite a long way from that. But I think, for children who have that extreme sort of high-end addiction to gaming as laid out here, and it's a really high bar, I think it's helpful to have that language. And also it distinguishes them from children who just like to play games a lot and maybe just need to do other things a bit.
So gaming has been around for a long while. And now it has a bit of a negative image. Has it always had that, and why are we in the situation now?
I think whenever you see a game that's hugely popular, we sort of scrabble for ways to talk about it. And then sometimes it's the negative stories that rise to the top. I think if you look at the wider view of games and the sort of experiences they offer, you see, very positive experiences alongside those negative experiences. And so I think it depends which direction you're looking at, how you perceive games. And I think generally we need to find ways of having better conversations around the games we play, and particularly between parents and children, which is one of the things I'm hoping to help with my book.
Do games, now they're so advanced, are they specifically designed to make us want to play them for longer and longer?
I think in a similar way to good food, have a good food at a restaurant, maybe a dessert, you think, maybe I could have another of those. It's so nice. We'll say that, won't we? In that same way, a video game, once you've played it once, you want to play it again. Obviously, the barrier to playing it again and again, it can be lower. And you can have that kind of merry-go-round kind of effect, so you can always play just one more go. So that there is that element of part of the design, but they're entertainment and they're supposed to be lighthearted. So I think when children are getting into that territory, they just need parents to be present in the games that they're playing and in that game playing space, and to guide them like they do in other areas of life.
But then things like films and TV shows are also entertainment. I just wonder why we don't hear of people having film addiction, and yet now gaming addiction is a thing.
Well, I think that's part of the peculiarity of WHO. That sort of narrowing down just on gaming addiction, and it is part of a wider way of us consuming media. Obviously, it gives us the language for games, and I think an individual could have a similar addiction to other things. And if you look at the criteria, you could apply that to lots of different media. Obviously, this particular definition of gaming disorder just applies to video games.
Do we need to get the NHS in on this? Do they need to be doing some of the treatment?
My view is that really a much more sort of cost-effective and better way is to help parents sort of do this from an earlier age. And I'm not just saying, it's the parents' fault and wagging a finger. It's saying that parents need really good resources to help them be present and guide their children with the games they play. And being honest about the fact that sometimes it's difficult, that it's not just about reading the PEGI ratings and then just saying no, that it's more to it than that. But if parents have the right resources, and the parents I talk to are keen to have that and to play their role, I think you can see off a lot of these problems before they arise. But obviously, this is an area where we're learning this and we're not always getting it right. And so, any assistance, I think, is welcome.
You're right, that the parents these days must also know quite a bit about gaming. We're of a generation where we probably played, whether it be Horace Goes Skiing or Duke Nukem, we've spent many a time actually involving ourselves with games. But then, is it different for the new generation? Because it's really exploded, this issue.
I think it's different for parents today because in other areas of parenting, they can ask their parents, how did you do this for me when I was a child, mum or dad? But it's less likely that they're going to get that sort of advice and support from their parents to help them with parenting their own children. So I think that's the kind of the sea change that we're seeing. And my expectation is as we understand games better and as parents have more resources and get more involved in gaming, this is something which will become less of a headline and more just sort of the day-to-day. And obviously you will still have extremes where an individual has maybe an addictive issue And that may alight on video games, just like it could be for something else. But those are the kind of the rare moments. I think a lot of the headlines we're seeing around Fortnite and the WHO currently is just because of the popularity of the game. It's a really big issue because so many children are playing it.
And actually, you hit a word there which leads me to my final question, because you said headline. Is it a case where there's just a few but very shocking stories that we hear it so much, or do you actually see many people who literally can't stop gaming?
I see very few, quite the reverse. I don't see the numbers to match the headlines. What I do see, I think, are parents that aren't quite sure how to offer that guidance. They want to play a more active role. They want their children to be better at stopping when they ask them to. They want their children to play games which are maybe a bit less violent. And so it's at that kind of medium level where parents are actually having issues rather than at the extremes. Obviously, there are those cases, but I think those are hugely rare.
Andy, thank you very much. That's Andy Robertson, who is a gaming expert. I'd like to know your experience of this, your family experience of this. You've got children who are playing